I haven't been to the gym lately, so I'm the shapeless.
You're the shapeless. My name is Jeff Irving, and this is the Exploring Vrahode podcast. I'm the creator of the Vrahode game system, and in this podcast, we're going to do a deep dive into the lore and gameplay of Vrahode. I'm joined by Brandon Rollins, who will be acting as stand-in for you, asking many of the questions you might be curious about yourself. Brandon, what are we talking about today?
Well, when we last left off, I was asking you about some of the creatures in Vrahode, and I realized actually that it was too deep to try and shoehorn into just one podcast. It's just too much information. So I wanted to kind of pick up where we left off and start asking for more details on how these playable creatures live. And I mean, like, I've got your website pulled up. Let's just go one by one, and you can just kind of tell me, like, what these guys, what their lives are like, and where they live, and
Yeah.
like that. So let's just start with the and the mispronunciations again. Torlin.
Oh, the Tyrone. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So
One.
Yeah, I know it. Tyrone. So basically, when the Akorish came to Vrahode, they had these potent magics, and they decided they were going to craft a variety of races from the elements, the flora, the fauna of Vrahode. And when they visited the forests, they decided to craft the Tyrone. And the Tyrone is basically a race that is of the trees. Their magic, everything about their society is crafted from the trees. And so if you choose to play a Tyrone, what you end up with is abilities to protect yourself while you exist in the forests. Or if someone is going to attack you, then you have the ability to do a little bit of damage to them because of your kind of thorny, barky kind of skin. Or
That's awesome.
if you're going to reach out and hit somebody, then you have the ability to bend and warp wood because you're of the forest and of the trees. So anything ranged that you do is basically kind of going to get a bonus because you're bending it and warping it to your will. And so it's reaching out to hit things in the way you hope that they will. Where most of the races would be like, let's shoot it and it ends up where it ends up. No, not the Tyrone. It's going to end up where we want it to end up. So there's
It's like being attacked by a Home Depot. That's awesome.
Home Depot. Oh my gosh. Exactly. That's exactly it. Okay, so I mean, I guess where do we go from the Tyrone?
Well, I was just wondering, like, are they the first ones that the Akorish crafted, or would that be another one?
I'll be honest with you. When I set out to write the story of Vrahode, the first character that came to my heart was someone named Piril Turin, and he was the son of this fellow named Durin Turin, who was also a Tyrone, and he was this young scout that lived in a village called Ilnu, and he served to protect the village from threats without. And so he went around the forest, the edges of the forest, and watched for threats that came from beyond that. And so, yeah, I think the Tyrone really kind of were the first race that really touched my heart. And I love this idea of a race that was kind of delicate almost. You know, I mean, wood is resilient, but it's not like stone and it's not like metal. And if a race is crafted from the forest, then they're going to be kind of delicate like that, you know?
Yeah, like when they're born, do they start as saplings and kind of grow?
You know what's crazy is they have this ritual in the Tyrone society, and they have a tree that exists within each village. And there's a sacred place beneath those trees called the Pava. And a male Tyrone and a female Tyrone, they will descend into the Pava, and they will do what Tyrone do. And ultimately, what's left is a seed that is germinated. And then what happens is they leave, they bury They bury the pava in the dirt, fill it in as part of this ritual, and like 3 or 4 months later, a young Tyrell is born. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. And so when you're playing as one of them, what are they really good at?
What, a Tyrell?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll tell you what, they're not going to be the best warrior type characters. They're just not as savage or as overtly used to using weaponry. So they're great support staff. They're great scouts. They understand the lay of the land better than most. So I would say that a Tyrell as a playable race are probably support, like off tanks or casters,
Mm-hmm.
or even healers. I mean, they make great healers. So that's kind of what you can look at if you're looking at a Tyrell as your main hero in the game, and that's what you think. Hey, I'm gonna go through the campaign, and this is my main hero. Don't shy away from the Tyrell.
Mm-hmm.
They're amazing. It's an amazing race.
Versatile and not really someone that you use as a bruiser, but are otherwise like really capable of doing a lot of different things.
No, but just to tell you, I mean, we have 12 pre-generated heroes in the game. And the 2 pre-generated heroes from the Tyrell race are the Shield, which is like a paladin almost. They're able to deal out good damage, but they're also about protecting their comrades. They're very good at healing and off tanking and kind of being that kind of protector role. And the other one is the other pre-generated hero is Sahrhune, the female, and she is more of a pure caster healer. So she's going to cast spells that will do some direct damage, but she's also going to be quite adept at making sure that none of her comrades die.
See, that's cool. And that, just so everybody knows, this is something that you've already told me. There are pre-generated heroes, but you can also create your own custom ones as well. I just think that's something worth mentioning here.
Yeah.
I guess, do they grow in Zone 7B? I'm just curious. I'm planting my garden for next year.
Well, yeah, if you have the absolute proper fertilizer, it's possible.
I'm actually not good with fertilizer. I ruined all my cucumbers this year.
Well, I have 2 dogs that make plenty of fertilizer. If you'd like some of theirs, I'll ship it to
trust me,
you.
I'm
Free of
familiar
charge.
with how much fertilizer dogs can make.
Free of charge.
So I guess you've also got on your webpage, you've got the Minoc, who are these kind of mushroom guys. What's life like for them? Where do they live?
Well, they live on an island called Prahar, and it's isolated, and they live in an isolated part of that called the Darkened Grove. And even though the Minoc are probably the softest skinned and most delicate of the hero choices you could make, they live in the most hostile environment. The creatures that live in the Darkened Grove are just brutal, but they protect themselves by building their homes and villages up into the mushrooms that extend way up into the canopy. And so they go up there and they build these homes so that they're not in danger of all these things running around the forest floor that are just horrible. Their skin is super soft and delicate, and that's why whenever you play a Minoc hero, they do not use cutting weapons. They're afraid of them. They're afraid to sharpen their own weapon because their skin is like pulpy and it's very soft. So they tend to be more of the caster classes. They are powerful in magic. They can bring a ton of magic to bear that a lot of the other races won't or can't. But don't give them a sword. They don't want that. They don't want to be near a sword.
Well, I mean, it makes sense because their whole physiology, they're so soft that they have to stay far away from battle. They got to use their magic abilities, and it sounds like they're pretty smart too. Like they have the ability to build structures to keep them out of harm's way.
Yeah.
Now, when you say they live in a tough environment, do they have the kind of culture that you would see of people who live in tough environments? Like, like way up in the rural reaches of Alaska or something, how people are just really good at living in the cold. Do they have something
Well,
comparable?
let's just say that the Eskimos of Alaska, the amazing thing about the Eskimos of Alaska is they have 23 words to describe snow.
Hmm.
Well, here in North America, we have what, maybe two or three. It's like, oh, that's a dry snow. That snow packs well. The Minoc have that many words to describe mushrooms and things that happen in the forest. And so they're very accustomed to living in the world that they do. And they also, because their skin is so soft, they have found lots of ways to defend themselves and elevate themselves above what happens on the forest floor. So
Yeah, so
yeah,
their
they're
whole
good.
language system is based around the kind of things they encounter as well. Like
Yep,
they have different vocabulary for it. That's really interesting.
absolutely.
That's the
Yeah.
anthropology part you were talking about in the I think an
Isn't it?
earlier episode. That's cool. So I think also you've got the Caltuk listed here. How am I doing on
The
pronunciation?
Katuq. Okay,
Caltuk.
yeah.
I'm giving myself
Okay,
that one. 2 for 3. 2 for 3.
you know what? I'm giving you plenty of grace. The Katuq are they're plains dwellers, and they were crafted and designed around the Native American culture. So if even though you don't see teepees in Vrahode, they're very nomadic or semi-nomadic in that they travel around the Great Plains of Rendur, which is the main island. And they're not setting up these really big elaborate settlements or villages. They tend to kind of set up camp and then break it down and move on. It has a lot to do with food sources. It has a lot to do with weather. But ultimately, they have a place of worship that they call. Let me pull it up here for you in the map. Let's see, art stuff, map art. Okay, so there's a place in the plains of Rendur called the Hills of the Living Spring. And this is kind of a pilgrimage for the Katuq. They travel there, they worship nature spirits there, and a lot of their culture kind of it they coalesce there. So there's different tribes among the Katuq. Not all of them agree all the time, but when they agree, everybody shows up to the Hills of the Living Spring and they have a great meeting every year, which in Vrahode, we don't have years, we have what are called spans. And so every span, the Katuq tribes will travel the great distances. And I mean, the plains of Rendur are, they're immense. But they'll travel to the Hills of the Living Spring to have this meeting among the tribes to talk about what's happened, who's died, who's been advanced, who's the new chief, and what new threats. And so that's kind of the Katuq society.
And so are they it sounds like if they're meeting on a regular basis that they're kind of spread out, not so far that they can't meet, but that they don't just all live next door to one another.
They do not. They do not. They are like almost like Indian tribes. You've got the Sioux, and you got the Apache, you've got the Comanche, you've got the Navajo, you got the Sioux, yes.
Yeah.
So they're very much an antecedent to Native American
Yeah,
cultures.
so would you say that they're kind of or let me think of a different question. Do they ever come into conflict with one another, or are they all generally pretty good at getting along?
Generally, yes, but actually, within the early campaign, we learn about some of the friction that happens between the tribes. But because the core box of the game series is about Calteeryn, which is this kind of prophesied figure, we're learning how to navigate these cultures, and that even though there's some friction within the tribes, the races are still fairly cohesive. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so I'm thinking. So the next one that you've got on here is the Atakul, and
Oh
they
yeah.
live. I think they live deep in caves. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. The Athakul I got to tell you, I am more excited to sit down with backers and fans and play an Athakul shadow.
Okay.
More than any race, more than any role. I want to play an Athakul shadow because they're just such a cool little ugly. I mean, their magic is based on blood.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and shadow. They'll sacrifice their blood and things to craft magic, and it's just so they're basically kind of this unsavory little creatures. I think they're primarily matrilineal. In other words, the mother descent pattern is what dictates these houses and this kind of intricate culture under the ground. But they have shadow mastery, which is this ability to mitigate when they're inside, when they're indoor spaces where it's dark. They can mitigate damage because they're used to living in that darkness. Or they can actually, if someone hits them with a blade and cuts them, because their magic is blood-based, they actually reduce fatigue when they're hit by a blade, and they're made to bleed.
So they are the legitimate bad guy who, when you, well, maybe not bad guy, but they're the legitimate character who, when you strike them, they become stronger. That's the thing.
Yes, exactly. And so they're a quintessential part of why we made the Vrahode game system, because it's like, in what D&D world or in what Tolkien world would the Athakul be heroes? None. They're worse than Gollum. I mean, Gollum is like, no, the Athakul, they're darker than that,
Yeah.
And they even have an ability that they can add, because they love blood so much that when they attack you, they can add a bleed effect to their attacks to create more blood to fuel their magic. So they're a really cool little kind of insidious. They're not super strong or powerful, but they have really, really cool skills that I can't wait to play.
Are the other playables kind of afraid of them because of what they are?
Well, here's the deal. The Athakul know their society so well, and they know that their own people are mistrustful and not to be trusted, that when they're involved in a group of overlanders, the Tyrell, the Kautuk, the Drellrune, they're actually very loyal, and they're actually very heroic. And so what you expect from the Athakul, you do not get. You get much, much more.
It's interesting because in this is a total left field example, but like in Star Trek, like the Vulcans, everybody knows them as being the logical ones, right? That's their whole thing. They're like logic, no emotions. Yep. But it's like when you actually watch a couple of the episodes and really get deeper into that and what that means, it's like they're actually super emotional. That's why they do the logic thing, because they can't handle their emotions. And for anybody who's not like watched a lot, like that's...
Well, let's not forget though that Spock is half human.
Well, exactly. There's that too. There's that too.
Yeah.
Well, and so much of his, I guess to use a very 2020s word, trauma, his emotional trauma, well, it's a good way of describing what he's got, though, comes from this kind of like balancing suppression of emotions and the different things that are expected of him, because he's both human and Vulcan. But anyway, these guys, getting back into the story of Vrahode, it's interesting that they have developed this kind of, this public facade, because it's necessary in making sure that they just present themselves well to society and like function the way that they ought to around others.
Yeah, I think most Athakul men and women, I think they seek the comfort of overland companions. I really do. I feel like they hate their own people. They know they're not worth a darn. They know that all they're waiting for is to backstab each other. And so when they escape the Underlands, even though they're not well suited for it in the Overlands, they find that trust. They find that people actually treat them like they deserve to be treated and don't screw them over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the next one you got on here is the... All right, here we go. The Drellrune.
Yeah, the Drellrune.
Yes.
The Drellrune are one of 3 reptilian races we have in the world. And I love reptilian races. I always loved lizard men in D&D and felt they were underserved, and they were just kind of relegated to this, this is the first thing you're going to kill, a lizard man. And I thought, what about making, in an anthropological sense, making this kind of complex multi-reptilian race society that kind of exists. Some of them get along, some of them don't, but they essentially cover the world except for the icy regions, which reptiles never do good in cold climates, right? They just don't. So we've got the Drellrune, which are essentially swamp dwelling reptiles. They are happiest there. They love fresh water. They build their villages in the fresh water, but they can be on the sea. But they have cousins that are better suited to the sea, which are the Sahrhune. And then the thing about reptiles is they love heat, because heat means activity. Heat means energy. Heat means that they are at their best. And so then they have this cousin, the distant cousins, called the Quayaun. And the Quayaun live in deserts. And so you have these three societies. But as far as the playable race, the Drellrune, their magic is about water. They need to keep water close. They need to build their villages there, but they're the masters of that. And so the other thing that the Drellrune really thrive at is they're not big fans of weapons. They kind of like to do things with hands and fists. And so they tend to be more of martial artists. They thrive without swords or shields, but with fists and feet.
That's cool. Now, when they get into the landlocked regions of Vrahode, or especially the icy regions of Vrahode, do they start to suffer as a result of being away from their element?
They do. They very much do. Every race in the game series has its sweet spot. Its place where it's thriving. And let me tell you, the Drellrune are not going to be happy in the deserts. They're not going to be happy in the icy areas. They're going to be happiest in any region that has water. But there's a lot of regions with water in this world. You've got coastal, you've got river, you've got marsh, you've got just straight out ocean. And so any place that they can touch their primary source of magic, that being water, they're going to be the masters. Anytime they're away from water, they're going to be diminished for sure.
Yeah.
And what you get with the Drellrune is you get mitigation, of course, in areas with water. They have this spell called Water Noose, or Watery Noose, that allows them to kind of wrap around a target's neck and kind of strangle them in water in battle. So that kind of hurts them. And they also, they're resistant to poison. And so that's really nice when you have a race that can almost cleanse themselves with water magically and kind of get rid of poison. That's powerful.
Yeah, certainly. It seems like they'd be good to have on the team.
Oh, heck yeah.
Especially they're a melee one too. I mean, it's there's not that many. Well, I suppose the Atakul would also be very good in melee because they're so much driven by the shedding of blood. But it's maybe they would act as a bruiser. Am I understanding this right? They're right up front and fighting.
I think if I was putting a party together and I wanted the perfect off tank, in other words, I've got a tank. I've got a guy that can wear all the armor, that's going to be right up front, beating the crap out of stuff face to face. It wouldn't be a Drellrune. But if I wanted someone next to them, it would be a Drellrune.
Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I want him to be that off tank. Yeah.
So the last one that we've got is and then we'll cover this, and I think on the next one we'll talk about friendly races of Vrahode. Is the Mahori. So what's their story?
Yeah. Well, the Mahari are probably the most reclusive and misunderstood race of the 6 playable races. They have their own island that is very remote. I consider it much like Hawaii. They're not part of the mainland. They do their own thing. They don't interact much with other races. And they're very diminutive. They're tiny little 3-4 foot tall humanoids, but they have such an affinity and a kinship with the top tier predators of their own island of Duwara that they can actually embody those behaviors in combat. And so what it does is it gives you this small creature that is, I mean, I think by all intents and purposes, kind of elf-like. I mean, they have pointed ears and a long tail, and they look kind of bestial and primitive. But they study these top tier predators so closely that they can copy them in battle. And so, to discount them as a viable main tank or as a viable off tank, or even, I mean, I think you would be dismissing an amazing race because they're just really cool. The female pre-generated hero is called Kareev, and she is a siren, and she has the ability to sing, and to have her singing modify the conditions of battle. And then the male, Mapari, is a warden. So he has the ability to take control. He's basically a pet class. He can take control of a beast and keep it under his command. And he's also an amazing archer. So he's got the ability to kind of stay out of the fray, use his bow, control his beast in battle. Like a hunter in World of Warcraft, he's kind of like that. He stays back a little bit, but he's got such a kinship with these beasts that he can control them in battle. That's kind of cool.
That's cool. And so you said like the one that you're looking most forward to playing is the Atakul for sure.
Oh, the Shadow. Yeah, the Shadow is like a rogue. And when we go into a dungeon, they come into their own when we're in the Underlands, which is a big chunk of the game. And when you're down there, one, they don't have any minuses to their vision because they're used to living in dark conditions. And they have an ability that comes with them as a new hero called Inner Workings. And the Inner Workings ability gives them this huge plus to their focus, to their roles when they're trying to unlock doors and chests and to disarm traps and to keep our travel in the Underlands, which are horrific and chaotic, safe. And so I can't wait to play one of them because I get to kind of keep the party safe with my abilities. That's really cool.
That is going to be cool. I'm going to need a little more time to figure out which one I want to play as. We'll get to the pre-generated heroes at a future episode, and I'm sure I'll be able to make a decision at some point before the prototype arrives. So, I'll just keep doing some research and figure out who I want to play as. This is exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be so fun. I can't wait.
So there's more friendly and neutral races that we can go over. I say let's save them for the next episode. And why don't you take us out on this one?
Okay. Thank you for listening to the Exploring Vrahode podcast. If you enjoyed this show, take a moment to subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It helps more than you know. You can learn more about Vrahode on vrahode.com. That's VRAHODE.com. Link in the show notes. And you can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're at Vrahode. Thank you again for listening. We really appreciate it. Keep an eye out for our next episode in 2 weeks.